Hey, yo, what it did, y'all? Let's get right into it. We got to talk about crafting, right? Because gearing is important. We all know that gearing is important. And right now, I think we could all agree to some degree that we don't feel like we can actually do very much with this crafting system. We're faced with a plethora of problems in this game. This game is hard, y'all. Like, PoE 2 is a hard game. And along the list of things that are hard in the game is that it's hard to feel like crafting actually does anything for us. Not that it doesn't do anything for us, right? Like, we can feel the improvement in our gear, but crafting does not feel like the tools that we need in order to really harvest that power out of our gear. And that's a shame because it's a core part of this genre. Making your characters feel better is a core part of ARPGs. It's why so many of them, all of them really, have gone through massive sweeping strikes on ways that they can improve their crafting system, right? Torchlight Infinite, in the short time period I've been playing it, has reworked it twice already. Last Epoch went through 3 reworks, if I'm not mistaken, that I was around for. D4 did a massive set of updates as they kept adding to it when they realized they launched a bare bones one, which they launched a bare bones one in Diablo 3 as well. And both base Diablo 4 and Diablo 3 got clowned extremely hard for having bad crafting systems, right? Let's talk about how PoE 2 can fix itself so that it doesn't fall into that category of getting clowned on for having a bad system. And it's worth noting, there's at least features in PoE 2 system. There are actually things that we can do crafting wise in PoE 2. We just need access to them. But I'll talk about that later, right? First, we need to talk about one of the major differences between PoE 2 and PoE 1's crafting, and I think a part of definitely something that skews all of our understandings, right? Whether you're a player of PoE 1, you're a player from other ARPGs that have similar systems to PoE 1, or even honestly, if you're a developer of GGG, a lot of us only really know games where reforging is a part of the game. Reforging being the ability to re-roll the fullness of an item, right? The ability to scratch what's on the item and re-put new odds on it is something that is pretty universal across crafting systems, with the exception of like Diablo 4, actually, and Diablo 3. And that's actually a part of why they got clowned for so long as a crafting system, is that you can't reforge in those games. You got to roll one mod on the item, and then you would add stuff to it in D4, not in D3, but in D4, you can add things to it beyond that point. And I applaud GGG for trying something in that realm, because I think that they've got the right idea. I feel like D4's crafting system actually feels really good to interact with. And it's because you actually get the ability to play with the steps of the process. And there are redos in other places that don't invalidate the actual hunting of the initial item that you're working on, which is what I think GGG tried to emulate and just kind of missed on. So what does the process currently look like in PoE 2, such that we can then understand where the problems may lie? Well, you get an item, you go, ooh, this is the base I need. Transmute Og, cry in the corner, because your Og missed. You're now standing there with a blue item with 2 useless modifiers on it. It goes in your 3-to-1 pile for later. Or maybe you actually hit 1 or 2 mods. And so you're like, oh yeah, maybe it's time to regal this item, and it misses. So you go cry in the corner again. Maybe you do have 2 mods on it, so you're like, you know what? Fuck it, we exalt this shit. You slam exalts. You fill the item up using exalts. All the modifiers you add suck. And you cry. And now, then you're like, you know what? I'm going to chaos it. I can get this. I can get this back. And you cry again. And now I'm only highlighting the negatives, right? Because my quarterstaff is crafted on the pure opposite side of the spectrum, where I identified a decent item to start with, hit a ridiculous chaos orb, and then slammed it twice. It was like, oh my God. 500 PDPS quarterstaff with crit on it is insane, right? Like, I got extremely lucky in that regard. So you can get both sides of it, right? But, how frequently are you winning? And do you get to pull enough attempts at the slot machine to feel like it's fine when you're missing, right? And that's why I say that one of the big things is that we need more attempts. We actually need to just straight up be able to get more bases, right? Like, if that's going to be our crafting system, give me more bases. Gambling does not count because I can't even like transmute or essence the things that I get from gambling, which is really annoying. But at least I can gamble, ignore how much gold it costs and how expensive things are in gold. Different problem altogether, right? I thought gold was supposed to be more of a non-resource. No, it hurts, right? So then we need other ways to get more attempts, right? Because if it's not going to come from the gambler, and I can't just drop the bases I need because, they're trying to avoid the PoE 1 problem of just loot being all over everywhere wastefully and causing performance problems, which is a valiant thing to talk about. We need to solve these problems. And it's worth noting that another way to solve this problem, I actually hit on in a video before PoE 2 launched, and I was really hoping that GDG was going to have the foresight to realize when they announced this feature in, I believe it was XLCon or one of the interviews that they did, where they talked about how rares have tiers on them sometimes, right? Rares and Magic Items can have a tier on it. You might have seen like a tier 3 item, or I've seen tier 5 items, right? And you ID them and they roll really well. Not well in the sense that you would guaranteed want to use it immediately on the spot, but more so that it rolls with high tier modifiers. And you're like, ooh, this is really cool. I'm going to slam on it. And then you slam T1 and T1 and you're like, you're kidding me. I just slammed 2 awful modifiers of extremely low rolls on my item that is a T5 item. I was really hoping that they were going to expand that concept to allow it to apply to crafting on that item afterwards as well, to then have that be the thing that matters in the, acquisition of a good item comes from then you drop a good base that then makes it easier for you to craft on it, and that could have been like a part of the loop. And we missed that because I guess it's so important that I feel the weight of that life mod I was using in Act 1 of the campaign when I'm about to fight the Arbiter, right? That's so important. Thank you, GGG. Very cool. Which, not the worst thing in the world, but it's just something to think about. It's another place they could solve the problem, right? Maybe instead of giving us more items to try on, because that could cause bloat issues or performance issues or whatever, it could just be that culling of modifiers as we go up in the game. Torchlight does this, and I think it's beautiful. Or if you look at Last Epoch, you get more forging potential as you get higher up and hunt down higher rarity items, such that you can then get higher modifiers overall on the item. And it's beautiful, right? That you're going to feel this energy of this idea that that's a great idea, and I would have loved to see it in PoE 2. C'est la vie, right? Now, the other major problem, and the one that I think is far more important actually, is scarcity, right? I talk a little bit about it with the bases, but I don't think the scarcity in the bases is the problem. Reflect back on what I talked about with the crafting process. Did you notice how I didn't mention essences or omens in that process? Yeah, that was intentional, right? Because scarcity is a thing. Scarcity, it's important, I guess, for balancing the average power level of a player at insert point in time and to allow you to feel like you've hit it big in some way, shape, or form. But there's definitely a limit when scarcity feels good. And I have a fantastic story to tell you about this, right? It's about PoE 1. Essences in PoE 1. You're an old enough PoE 1 player, you know where I'm headed with this thought. So way back in the day, no, I'm kidding, it's not that old, right? But up until Heist League, and including Heist League, essences were kind of this thing that they function like they do in PoE 2, where they will just spawn in the zone every so often, and you'll be like, ooh, an essence. And then you will forget that you had essences at all, because quite frankly, you don't drop enough of them for them to be particularly useful, and you're just like, whatever, I guess it's a thing, cool, whatever, yada yada, right? And then in Echoes of the Atlas, GGG started to add these things called Atlas passage trees, right? They were the prototype for what we have now in PoE 2 even, right? Where regions of the Atlas had investment trees so you could specialize in what mechanic you really wanted to farm. And now it's starting to get interesting because there's an area on the Atlas that specializes in essences. And it's like, ooh, we're right there. But there's still no way to spawn more essences super reliably. There was a sextant modifier that kind of helped us there, but it wasn't, that's not super accessible yet, right? That's still a pretty hard thing to come by, the Sexton modifier for spawning +2 essences. Ultimatum League. One of those leagues that is heralded by a lot of players as one of the best leagues that we've ever had in PoE 1. There's a number of different reasons that that league is so good, right? But I think that the number one contributor to this was not the league mechanic. It was not the state of juicing or anything. I think it's the fact that people actually had access to essences, because the Atlas Passive Tree system added in Echoes was combined with the Zana map device mod for essences every map. A very cheap source of essences for the low price of 2 chaos, which was not a lot at all, by the way. Like, think of 2 chaos the way you think of like 2 augs, honestly. Maybe a little bit more expensive than that. But you put 2 chaos in your map, you are getting multiple essences in your map. And then you go sit in Haywork Hamlet and you farm for essences. And what did essences do? They let you craft your gear. For the first time ever for essences in PoE 1, they suddenly were accessible. Emphasis on accessible. It's not like they were weak. There were some small buffs to some weaker essences in that patch. But the big thing is they became accessible, because even me as a newer player at the time, it was very easy for me to identify that essences were insanely strong crafting tools should you actually have access to them. But we needed to get our hands on them. And GDG opened the floodgates in Ultimatum and let us craft with them. And it was insane. Everybody suddenly was crafting these great items, and we had resources galore to craft good items with, right? And it was in that moment that you realized that the problem with the crafting system started to not be the rarity and the struggle of getting items to themselves to roll well, but rather that we just needed more pulls on the slot machine. Scarcity ruined PoE 1's crafting for a long time for a lot of people. That's why we talk a lot about PoE 1, about the gambling that you get from crafting, right? Let's go gambling. Unfortunately, it's always, aw, dang it. Except now there's enough resources that you can pull until you start winning. And then in Expedition, they took it away from us for a week, in addition to all the other nonsense they did. And I definitely think that, like, Expedition could have been a wildly different league if people were actually able to craft their own gear to try to solve that problem. And that's the thing, right? When we talk about accessibility and scarcity, it's worth noting that it is a market tool in this game. It is not a balancing tool. This is not a standard RPG. This isn't you booting up Elden Ring and, them telling you there's only going to be so many, or my bad, I don't know the currency in Elden Ring. We'll use Dark Souls 3 for a second because I know that one better. There's only so many Titanites in the game, right? You only get so many sharpening stones. You only get so many of these resources. Make sure you use them wisely, right? That is pre-planned. That is like knowledge that you understand from a solo player perspective, right? But the scarcity in PoE is not that. The scarcity in PoE exists to maintain market value. And you know who benefits from that? This guy right here. I benefit from that because I play the game enough and make enough money in the game to buy whatever it is that I need so I can use it. And the average player suffers for it. Because you know what's going to happen at some point in PoE 1, in PoE 2? If they don't change anything, I'm just going to go buy crafting resources, say fuck this farming shit, because they refuse to design the game in a way that allows us to just farm for it and just buy it and big money my way out the problem. Because I guess that's what they want, right? They don't want you to be able to craft. That's a bit inflammatory, but it's the general thought, right? Because if you knew what essences and omens did, you would understand why it's such a problem that there's no access to it, right? And you might be thinking, now that I've mentioned it, you might be like, oh yeah, what do they do, right? Omens, they are categories of items that straight up modify the outcomes of your crafting currencies. Example, right? Omen of Dextral Erasure makes it so that when you pop a Chaos Orb, it will only remove a suffix. It's a one-time use item, you'll need to get more omens. But like, imagine how strong that could be. If you're, say, playing a monk with a quarterstaff that has a really nice fizz roll in its prefixes already, and you just need to get rid of one of those trash suffixes, Omen of Dextral Erasure is insane for that. That the targeting is ridiculous, right? And that's a big thing. And it only comes from ritual, and you barely see it in ritual, right? Until you invest further into it. Or essences, right? Which are just targeted transmutant regals, using their targeting to focus on a specific category of modifiers, life, defenses, attributes, etc., right? And then there's transmutes are the regular essences, and regals are the greater essences. However, you don't have a lot of them, so you probably haven't even really thought about using them all that much, right? Like, imagine if you actually had access to either of these currencies. Imagine what you could do. Because here's the thing. As a person who's played as much as I have a paltry amount of essences, and I think 2 omens total. Now, granted, I need to target ritual a little bit more, but targeting ritual was not going to be map sustained. And when I did target ritual, it still didn't feel like I was getting all that much in the way of omens anyways. So, not too happy with that. And, you know, why would I? Why would I target it when, unlike people who aren't playing for money, I'm just going to farm currency and buy the omens and essences I need in order to actually craft items, while everybody else suffers because they can't interact with the crafting because they don't have enough money for it. This is why I brought up the essence system, because that's what essences were previously. Essences, before the accessibility changes in Echoes of the Atlas / Ultimatum League, were this insanely powerful crafting tool that you just didn't have access to. And they gave us access to it as a player base, and we all prospered for it. Stop using scarcity to force market value on a thing. Let the market value of an item come from, you know, us figuring out if it's actually rare enough to make it need to be price gouged. And I frankly think that functionality like this shouldn't be price gougeable, and it should be a thing that you can access earlier. Like, you get maybe like, I think like 2 or 3 essences throughout the campaign that I feel like I've gotten on both runs of my leveling so far. That's ridiculous, right? You barely see them in maps, even with the little bit of investment that you do get. Like, come on. Anyways, I could go on forever. I really could. But I want to bring it all the way back to the starting point. Crafting is about feeling like you have the tools that you need in order to solve the problems that your character has. And I hope in this video you've realized the tools do exist. We have the currencies. The omens and essences do actually exist, and they're actually really powerful for crafting purposes. It's just, do you have them? No. And that's what makes the crafting system not feel good right now. I genuinely believe that the crafting system could be good if we could interact with it, right? If we could interact with it in full. In full. The PoE 1 crafting system was not a good system when your crafting was alt spamming until you could regal then annul down and multi-mod. That is not a good crafting system. It's a consistent crafting system that ignored the rest of what they added in the game. The fossils, the essences. Like, imagine if we were still doing that and they kept trying to add in things like harvest and all that other stuff, right? Like, it's about the ability to actually use the full of the system. The average player needs to feel incentivized to use the system, not just because of the power they could gain from using it, but also from the fact that they won't feel like they are losing out on critical value, especially when you design your game around trade. That's all my thoughts, you know? If you agree or disagree, you know, let me know in the comments. Let me hear what you guys are thinking about crafting in the game, some of your potential solutions or points of feedback, anything that you feel like I missed or maybe even misrepresented, right? Maybe there's something that you feel like actually does work a little bit better than I gave it credit for. Let me know, right? I want to, this again, like I said, it's about opening a discussion and giving GDG open feedback, because this is going to be a thing that needs several rounds of iteration. I do not expect them to get it right. They're not just going to come through with a patch next week where they're like, okay, we're going to sweepingly change the crafting system and fix literally every problem all in one batch, and it's going to become the most perfect crafting system ever. That's not going to happen, right? There needs to be iteration, and you want to make sure that you don't open too many floodgates all at once. I understand that. And I trust that they'll figure out how to get it right. But part of that trust in them getting it right is that we have to give them the feedback. Hence this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.